So, how this concept, synchronization concept, is implemented? Assume we have a public telephone booth. So, public telephone, it has a cabin, public telephone booth. Let us consider this analogy. It under a cabin and there is a lock in the cabin, and this is owner of the telephone booth and this is one of the customer. We can say it is a first person. So, when first person came to a phone call to make a phone call and talk to the owner, so owner give the key to the first person to make the call. When the first person using the telephone, meanwhile some other person, second person came to make a phone call. Then the owner said wait for some time because because phone is using by some other person. The second person is waiting state. Once the first person finished the call and released the key, then the second person got the chance to call. Internally, this type of concept, same concept is implemented in synchronization. Every object in Java has a unique clock. Suppose this is one of my object for name is X. If somebody want to any thread, if suppose T1 is my thread, is want to access this object, then first you have to acquire some lock. This lock concept is implemented in Java synchronization. Every object in Java has a unique clock. So, if I compare with this telephone booth, compare booth. So, telephone, suppose this is one of my method M, and if somebody want to access this method, if you compare with telephone, this want to access the method, we have to use the synchronize keyword. Synchronize M. So, internally synchronization concept is implemented by using this lock concept. Whenever we are using the synchronize keyword, the lock concept will come into our picture. If a thread want to execute synchronize method, or you can say block on that given object, then first you have to it has to get the lock of that object. Once the thread got the lock, then it is allowed to execute any synchronize method on that object. So, compare with this one, this analogy. So, when first person is using the phone call, the second person has to wait. So, he be in waiting list because some other person is waiting the telephone booth. Same way, when some method has been used by some thread, so this synchronize method is by some thread, for example T1, then if at a time some other method cannot access it, so that thread has to wait to finish the thread which executes the synchronize method. So, whenever this method will release the lock, then the second person or second thread will get the chance. That is the basic concept. So, that means if a thread wants to execute a synchronize method on that given object, then first it has to get the lock of that object. Once the thread got the lock, then it is allowed to execute any synchronize method. That is the basic funda of the synchronization. So, once a method execution complete, automatically thread release the lock and acquire and releasing lock internally take care by JVM. It is not the task of programmer. Programmer not responsible for this activity. all take care by the JVM, Java Virtual Machine. So, suppose let us take an example. Suppose we have a class name is X, and within this class we have a method that is called synchronize. We have a synchronize method. For example, M1 is the name of this method, M1, and some blank body here, and we have another method suppose M2, and we have also another method. Then we have closed the class body. Now the question is whether this method will be accessed by some thread at a time, whether this method M1, M2 will be accessed by some other thread or same thread, or you can say same object, based on same object. So if I compare with this one, so suppose we have an object that is X is my particular object. If T1 is my thread, is acquired this object lock of this object, and he want to execute the M1 method. So which one is synchronize? I have already discussed in here. Okay, synchronize method. And some other thread at the same time want to access this object. What will happen? It will be accessed or not? No, it will be not accessed by this object, because this method M2 method is synchronize. It cannot access the M2 method because both method are synchronized. M1 method is synchronized, M2 method is also synchronized, okay, and both are referred to the same class. So only one object. So here X is an object, X is an object, make it capital. So X is an object. So since the T1 thread got the lock of this object, so it will execute the synchronize method M1, but at a time the T2 thread, another thread, is going to access another synchronize method, but the synchronize method is belongs to this object. So that is why it will not access this M2 method by this thread. But somehow same method, for example, I am thinking about another thread is come into existence and want to access the M1 method. It will be accessible by this thread T3, yes or no? No, it will not accessible by thread T3 also, because this lock is already occupied by T1 thread, and T3 is want to access the same method, M1 method, but it will not able to execute because the M1 method it belongs to X object. But what will happen is another thread, for example T4 is another thread, want to access another method for his M, which is non-synchronized method. If another thread want to access a non-synchronized method, so whether it will be accessed or not? Of course it will be accessed. So why? Because this method is not synchronized. So if this thread want to access this M method, don't need to any lock. So from this scenario we can understand that the lock concept is very important for synchronization. So if any method is synchronized and any thread got the lock on this object, so it will be not accessed by any other thread on that object. simultaneously, whether it may be a same method or whether it may be a different synchronized method, but it is only accessible if the method is non-synchronized. Are you getting that? So, from this point we can say that if a thread acquire a lock, then only it can access the synchronized method on that particular object, thread object. If any other thread simultaneously want to access this method, this synchronized method, or any other synchronized method on this object, will not able to allow to execute, but any other non-synchronized method will be executed. There is no problem. Basically, there is a two area of you can consider. One of the part is called synchronized area. Another part is called non-synchronized area. We will keep those code which are very important, or we will keep those code which are frequently updating, or it may be adding some new data to this particular code, or want to delete some data. So, that means any manipulation can be happen in this data, we can keep those code in my synchronized area. So, basically is for update. So, we will keep those data and it will be only accessible to those data only one thread at a time, but we will keep those code which are not frequently update or which is not going to update. For example, read operation, it is not going to update my data, but if I want to add some data, I want to delete some data from my database or any file. So, what will happen? It basically those code are very important, otherwise I will get the inconsistency data. So, that is why if multiple thread want to access simultaneously the particular method, we will keep those data in synchronize which are frequently updating, which are most valuable data, but we will not keep those data which is not related to update. That is the basic funda to keep the data secure or to solve the data inconsistency problem. So, so far we have covered what is advantage of synchronize, what is the disadvantage of synchronize, why we use the synchronize. So, if I want to say what is the what does mean the synchronization, we can say that synchronization in Java is the concept to control the access of multiple thread to share any resource, right? Are you got the point? Synchronization in Java is the concept to control all the access of multiple thread to share any same resource. Clear? Now, why we go for synchronization? We have already discussed that to prevent consistency problem, or we can solve with the help of synchronization, we can solve the data inconsistency problem. We also prevent the thread intercommunication also, that is one of the important use of synchronization. So, actually there are two types of synchronization, one is called process synchronization, another is called thread synchronization. Here we are just discussing only the thread synchronization, and thread synchronization is related to mutual exclusive, and we can implement the thread synchronization by using a synchronized block or by using a synchronize method. So we can synchronize only to method or only to block, but not a class, not a instance variable. Or you can use also static synchronization. And secondly we can say that when you are communicating with two thread, between two thread communication take place, that means intercommunication or intra thread communication, then the synchronization is also useful. So in this example we have seen that the most valuable concept is that if a thread want to access any synchronized block or any synchronized method, that object, that thread has to get the object lock we have seen compared to the public telephone booth. So if anybody want to access this telephone booth, then they has to acquire this lock, then he can use this telephone. If any other person meanwhile is want to access this telephone phone, so then he has to wait to get the lock. Same concept is used in our synchronization. If any thread want to access any synchronized method, first he has to acquire the lock concept, so get the lock of particular object, then he can access the synchronized method. And any thread who has completed the synchronized method or synchronized block, then automatically it will release the lock automatically after finish the job, assigned job. But we do not have to take care of this acquiring the lock, or we can say releasing the lock, because it all take care by the JVM. It is the not responsibility of the programmer. So we have seen that when we are talking about the synchronize, we have two part of the synchronize. One of the part is called synchronize area, where we can update the valuable data. We will keep the data which are very important, which are used for updation. We will keep this data in synchronize area, and we will keep those data which are not updating data, that for example read operation do not want to change or modify the data. So we will keep those data in non-synchronized area. There is a area which is frequently used by any other method. Here also we have seen that if any method, so in multi-threading concept, if any method is synchronized, only one thread is at a time going to access any synchronized method. It may be happen that within a class there are more than one synchronized method is available, but only one different object. It may be on different object. If it is different object, we can access it. But with the same object, for example in this example we have only one class, and this object is, this method is belong to this object. So here m1 m2, those synchronized method are belongs to the object class x. So if I want to m1 or m2 at a time, we can only access only one synchronized method. Why? Because every Java object in any object in Java has only one lock. Only one lock. You can compare with this telephone booth, only one lock is there to open the door, or you can say to access this method, only one lock is available. So we can write in this way how to implement this code. For example, if I want to implement, I will write this code in this way. So for example, CL class X, so I will write synchronize area, which are very important data, we will keep it here, and whenever we are going to perform, whenever we are performing update operation. Okay, this is synchronize area, and we will write some code in our synchronized non-synchronized area, whenever object state would not be changed like read operation. I think the basic concept is clear. What does mean the synchronization, why you go for the synchronization, what are the advantage, disadvantage, and what is the main or basic idea to get to access the synchronized method or block. So that means object lock is a very important concept in state synchronization. In next lecture we will see the example how to implement the synchronization, how to implement the synchronized method, and later we will see how to use in synchronized block also.